sit through a lot of things they may not want.
I was going, after he finished his opening, I was going to make a motion to change the agenda and have the public comment right after number 2.
So we might. I was not here last week. I didn't pick up on that, so I'm glad someone brought it up. So if that is amenable to the committee, we'll just go ahead and do that. So does that work for everyone here?
I'll second the motion.
Yeah, we talked about that on Monday. Yeah.
Okay. So what we'll do for those listening, if you come in later tonight, since we had it posted at 8:50, we'll stop again at 8:50 if there's new people. So we'll do it after item number 2. So with that, we'll get started with item number 2. What we thought we'd do with item number 2, and I know you guys talked about it as a committee with citizens and staff last week, but this is the first time we've had a full committee meeting since council took some action via a motion on a couple of weeks ago. It was brought to their attention by several members of council, both on and off the committee, that they didn't feel like the committee was moving in the direction that they had given or set in on the charter, So council asked the committee and passed a motion that basically said, let's concentrate on items number 3 and 4 of the charter. And to refresh our memory on that, I didn't bring a whole bunch of copies, but the charter that everyone agreed upon, and I believe you guys went through it last week, was to promote the dialogue among interested parties. We're doing that. That's been happening. Study the impacts and assess the risk of oil and gas development within the city. That's been going on. It's probably not finished. It'll probably continue as we continue discussions. Number 3 was determine if and what changes to the city's land use development code are needed. And the 4th item was to provide a written recommendation to City Council for consideration in their deliverance on Ordinance 1880, which is the moratorium. And a part of that, but with this as well, is working collaborative with the citizens and industry, council members on things that if we can't cover it in our land development code or it's not covered in our current land development code, the discussion has been, is there something that we could do through the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission that can be covered under a memorandum of understanding, which also helps in those areas that are unincorporated but within Commerce City's growth boundary. So what I wanted to do is just go through that, see if there's any questions, but I also want to go around the table, kind of get a read from everyone. Can we work under the premise of working through and starting to look at the land development code, changes that may need to be required, and then start coming up with a list on what type of recommendations this group might want to make to council. So I just want to I'll just go around the group. I'll try to pick on someone that doesn't have food in their mouth. So I'll ask, and I'll start with Andrew Casper.
Sure, I think that approach would be more productive.
Okay.
Can we introduce everybody? So
Yeah, we can.
Citizens know who
Sure.
is who?
We can take that break. Do you want to start, Jody?
Yeah, I'm Jody Bacon, and I am part of the Citizens Group for Commerce City.
Phil Barber, I'm special counsel representing City Council of Commerce City.
Steve Douglas, City Council at Large.
Wes Wilson, formerly with EPA, now with Be the Change.
Dale Hopwood, representing Halliburton.
I'm Chris Castilian with Anadarko.
I'm Phil Dell with Be the Change.
Dan Stapleton, resident, Commerce City.
Andrew Casper, Colorado Oil and Gas Association.
Tracy Snyder, former Mayor Pro Tem and Commerce City resident.
Renee Bullock, Commerce City City Council.
I'm Matt Lepore. I'm outside counsel for Hill Corp.
I'm Charlie Sharman. I'm with the Army at Rocky Mountain Arsenal.
Great. Thank you all. Tracy, I'll just continue around your direction.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
What we're trying to do is get a gauge going around the table with council's direction that they want us to concentrate on determining if and what changes the cities we should be recommending to the land development code
Right.
within the charter, and provide a recommendation to city council on items that we might want to consider when they consider ordinance 1880 again, which is the moratorium.
So the question is whether or not we feel we need to move forward, which obviously
Well,
we
can you move forward under that assumption?
do. I mean, we have some things on the table that we need to work on, but I believe we can move forward in a positive way. We have a lot of work to go to get there, though.
I don't disagree. Thank you.
So that's kind of a...
Mr. Bullock.
Yes, as being part of that 8-0 vote, yes, I feel we should be moving forward.
Agreed.
Matt Lepore.
I think it would be very productive to start looking at the land development code and see if there are things in that code that could be modified that would address some of the citizens' concerns and the council's concerns. I think it's also worthwhile considering, kind of on a parallel track, whether you could craft something that would be embodied as a memorandum of understanding that essentially would subject the signatories to that memorandum of understanding to conditions above and beyond the Oil and Gas Commission's rules. That has been done historically. The Commission has always had the power to do that. They've done it on a site-by-site, case-specific basis. This would take that concept and apply it to all oil and gas operations, or give the council or the local government designee the right to request that package of conditions of approval on any operations within the city.
Great, thank you. Charlie.
Yeah, Tom, I'm, again, mostly here to provide information to the group, but to the extent that doing that provides structure, I think it would help the discussion by doing that.
Okay, great, thank you. Jody?
I think that, last time we spoke, and I think every meeting we should probably start out with what our mission is, and that is to protect the health, safety, the welfare of our citizens to the highest extent possible. And I think that the last meeting we spoke about some very major concerns, such as the Rocky Mountain Arsenal. We talked about land, we talked about air, we talked about water, we talked about evaluating all those things. So if we're saying tonight that we want to start crafting regulations, I guess I'm confused about that. Maybe I misunderstood the question, but moving forward with regulations when we haven't even started with the things that we mentioned last week that we wanted to look at seems premature to me. And maybe, again, I misunderstood the question, but that's where I'm at.
Okay, that's the question, and that's the direction that council's asked this group to do.
Okay. Right, and again, I'm pretty sure that we all agreed last week that our priority and our mission statement was, again, to protect our citizens to the highest extent possible. Rushing into regulations and crafting them before we've even looked at the arsenal, before we've looked at, and had testimony from people from other counties that have been through and are currently living through drilling situations, to me is silly,
okay,
for lack of a better term.
I work for the council, so I'll do whatever they tell me to do.
Within reason.
Mr. Douglas.
No, he doesn't even have reason.
Well, the present oil and gas rules, I say, need to be modified to protect the public, not the industry. And they don't need to be drilling near a residential area or next to schools or homes. So as far as a start on this memorandum of understanding our land development code, from what I see, it's right now you can do drilling in industrial areas and residential zoning, and I think we could start there and take off the residential zoning area and just deal with the industry. But no, that is correct on what Jody said, that our last council meeting, we did ask, our last meeting last week, we asked the citizens as far as direction where they wanted to go. And the topic of air came up in the Rocky Mountain Arsenal, and just getting a third-party recommendation from the citizens to bring forth that expert to give a detailed on the specs and everything as far as oil and gas, as far as air quality goes. So as a council member, I know we had spoke about that on Monday. What about you, Will?
Well, I understood that there was a great deal of unfinished business. Unfinished business of bringing experts here to discuss air quality issues. The request to look at a legal review of state preemption and possible ban. Fully to flesh out the water issues. We are prepared to present a possible development plan looking at the lease acreage of these two companies and what might come down in terms of a full build-out. We're ready to speak to that tonight. So I think the work on understanding what the reasonable industrial activity is going to be here in the next 10 years, next 10 or 20 years, has to go first. For you understand what gaps there are in the state process to fill in commerce cities. So I thought there was 2 or 3 months work yet to do that before you go into land use discussion.
Well, I guess I'm agreeing that, to provide structure to the conversation, it would be beneficial just to move forward and take a look at what we have in place and opportunities where, we have contention, where we can identify those and focus the conversation.
Okay, thank you.
I'm with Matt. Tom, I think that we're at a place where we have, evaluated the issues. I think we understand what the citizens have concerns about. And, unless we can start moving in a direction of resolving those issues to the extent the city has the ability to do that, I guess I'm unwilling to continue down, as Mr. Wilson just suggested, 3 or 4 more months of, fact-finding and getting off on tangents that aren't even relevant to the issue at hand here. So we're committed, as I've told you all before, to work through this process to the extent that we see an end in sight. If this is just going to be a perpetual situation where we're here, every week, not getting any further along in the agenda to deal with the real issues that we have at hand here, then I guess we're not probably seeing eye to eye. And it sounds like there's some disagreement amongst this committee as to what the council has directed us to accomplish. So,
let me try and formulate what I think is going on here. Last week it was agreed that the highest principle involved in these proceedings was to protect the public's health, safety, and welfare. That was agreed to by everybody that was at this table. I think the question is how you do it. And certainly the oil and gas industry would propose that first we write some rules and regulations and then maybe 5 years down the line find out how effective they were in protecting public health, safety, and welfare. I think that's backwards. I think that if there is a delay, it's only the delay of getting to the point where you're satisfied that what you're doing is in the best interest of the people of the city. And I don't think you can do that by just launching into rules and regulations. First, you have to know what it is you're writing rules and regulations about. And I think there are a number of unknowns. We probably argued too much in the past about procedure and not enough about learning what needs to be learned to write good rules and regulations. And I thought last week you all agreed that we would set out, neither left nor right, and try and find out what we needed to know to make the citizens of this city comfortable with what's about to beset them. And I think that's the course of action we should take, and I thought it was agreed upon.
I've been in the aviation field for about 21 years, and we have a mantra, and that is if you're not sure of the outcome of a situation, you don't even attempt it. And I think the problem is we've come along, we've got a lot of information, but we have a lot of holes still that need to be filled in. For example, we have talked about the arsenal. We did have a presentation on the arsenal, but I think we don't know exactly where the plume that's 12,000 feet down is because that's never been drilled. air quality. We just don't know. We say, well, each well can emit this a certain amount of air per well legally, and that's fine. Well, what about 200? That doesn't change that number, but it changes the amount of gas we're going to be breathing in our neighborhood. We don't know that effect. We don't know how much is too much. And I like to know what that upper limit is and what we should expect. Ideally, we would have no emissions. So I think there's some holes that we need to fill in, and knowledge that maybe some of you in the industry feel comfortable with it because you're not living there, and you know a lot of the information already that you've been through in other communities, but we need to go through that ourselves to get comfortable, because I just don't know, like I said, some of those holes, and we need to fill those in.
Okay, thank you. I think part of the challenge is City Council has given the committee direction, which the direction is to start talking about the Land Development Code. I think if there are, and I just want to try this out, if there are questions as we're going through that process, I think we need to document those, know that they're holes, or suggest that maybe additional thought be given to City Council, because that could be part of your recommendation. And I just wanted to try that out with the group. Monday night at City Council, it was brought up, excuse me, by, I think, Councilman Douglas and Councilman Bullock about, for example, how many alternates will the citizens have? Council agreed that you could bring 2 additional alternates. And they also spelled out saying, and you can have those 2 alternates.
2 additional?
2 additional in addition to, I think Michael Scanlon is now an alternate. Mm-hmm. So total of 6 potential from the residents, but only 3 would be at the table actively participating at one time. It was also mentioned, and Council took no action on it. In fact, I think there was very little discussion, and Councilman Douglas and Bullock can correct me if I'm wrong, about additional experts. That did not seem to get much traction with City Council. Yes?
It was bringing, is the citizens are requesting experts on air.
Air, water, and I thought it was the refuge as well, additional
seismology. We've got the experts here.
Right.
Phil and Wes are experts in most areas except for the Rocky Mountain Arsenal. I mean, we've expressed that concern for many weeks, and, in the interest of time, if that's what we're interested in, let's get going on that.
So, and I apologize, I wasn't here last week, so you guys are helping me fill in gaps. Again, I think as we go through and start looking at the Land Development Code, and as we further our discussions, I think we need to bring up those questions that you have, the specific questions on what you would like City Council to discuss. And I'm trying to be an objective, independent party here with no sides on either side, just to help facilitate the discussion. So,
do you have the sticky things from last meeting? Because I think we posed a lot of our questions last week. We wrote them down. We took great care in writing down. Why don't we pull that out?
And I don't know if they're all encompassing.
Well, no, they're not all encompassing, but it was a starting point.
It's a starting point, and I think I'll have Alan stick them up on the wall. I think we need to add to those.
Which one was it?
Jumping aboard.
I don't think I printed them. I know. Well, I downloaded it.
So I'll have Alan's put those up on, probably on one of these walls, I think, instead of on here. But I think we can add to those as we're having these discussions. So, because I don't want to discount those, and I think you guys did have a good discussion last week. So with that, and I know I had gone through the agenda, it's out on the table, can we move forward with this meeting with, I think Mr. Barber is willing to start the discussion about, the overview of what the state does regulate with wells and what the well spacing is. I think that's where we can have some discussion on some of the research that I think the change and the citizens have done. Staff's had a discussion with them as far as what does that mean in this area, because I think Phil has got a map. And then Chris Kramer, our planner, is around someplace. I think he's ready to start walking through our existing land development code. Since we've got industry here as well. We've got the citizen representatives to go through and start going through. Here's what we've currently got in our books that we can regulate, at least on new wells. We recognize we don't have much control right now with existing wells, but could those be applied to existing wells? And I think that starts our discussion. And as things are identified that aren't in that, let's add them to the list so that we can start tracking those as we continue to move forward. So does the committee, does that sound like a good action or course to try for this evening?
Sorry, what was the... I was looking up the notes from last week.
To start having, after Phil has done his discussion on an overview of what the state can do with wells, I've got it as what is allowed by the state. I think that'll lead into some discussion about what is the realm that could happen in Commerce City. A lot of it is still unknown, as we've heard from the industry. And then start the discussion. Chris Kramer is one of our planners. He can start the discussion with what is in our current land development code, what we currently can regulate by the code that's been passed by City Council, get input from everyone on do we think should those stay in the land development code? Are those things that we can regulate or we think we should regulate as a committee? But at the same point, if you think of things that may need to be added, let's start listing those on the chart so that we don't lose track of those. And what I was just asking is, does that sound like a good course of action for tonight? I see some head nodding. Okay. So with that, I'm at number 2, and in keeping with the committee's request, are there folks in the public that would like to make public comment at this time? Got my list? Okay. Colton Geely? Geely. And actually, if you could come up to the podium, that way there's a mic, and I'll make sure it's on.
My family's been working on free energy for about 4 years, and since the process has been going so slow, it feels like it's been like a lifetime. So we're hoping that the fracking is delayed, or at least delayed, because our free energy is about to come out to the public. So it would have just been a waste.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Toma Henry? Oh. Tamara, okay. Sorry. And is it? Henry, okay.
As my son said, we've been working on free energy ideas for the last several years, and we are at the government level at this point with it, and we're so excited because it's going to literally make all of this obsolete, and we really don't want the fracking to happen. It wouldn't be good for any of us, and I'm just here to say that we need to focus on health and wellness and Mother Earth. And I'm not good at public speaking, so I apologize, I'm nervous. But I can't say too much about the idea because we're under non-disclosure. But this has been a labor of love, blood, sweat, and tears for the last several years. And we finally got the government to listen. So we're getting ready to go into mass production. We can't say how many months away this is. But basically, it'll be anywhere from, the unit itself will be anywhere from battery sized all the way up to industrial size. And you can use it in any application whatsoever. This is going to change everything. So we're tremendously excited. We've been really quiet about this. We're quiet people. We're not public people, but it's time to step up. So this is me stepping up. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Good luck. Okay, with that, I am going to turn it over to Phil Barber. Yes, you can.
Hang on, Christy, what's the...
Yes.
Tom's a good guy. Wasn't here last week, but he...
My name's Christy Douglas. Do you need an address tonight? Wow, Tammy. I just want everybody here to know who Tammy is. She is Gene Klein's niece, and Gene Klein was truly instrumental with bringing Commerce City forward to where it is today. There's a water treatment plant named after her. I mean, I'm breathless. She comes from a great family that is truly capable of great accomplishments. They cleaned up the Rocky Mountain Arsenal, or played a big part of it, got the water cleaned up for Commerce City. And I just want you to know who her family is, I guess. Thank you so much for coming tonight.
Thank you, Christy. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to make any comments at this time? Okay, great. Thank you.
Oh, sure.
Okay, I'm Phil Barber. I was hired by City Council to provide advice, primarily of a legal nature, to the Council about current status of oil and gas regulations in Commerce City, the tension that may exist between state regulations and the city's regulations, possibly what other communities are doing in response to potential development along the Front Range, and to provide legal advice to them if they have questions for me. Tonight, though, I'm wanting to start with just a little primer, background about some of the oil and gas.
That's a permit.
Oh, okay. Oh, very good. Dry erase. Okay. Thank you. I'm going to provide just a little bit of background about what is allowed under current oil and gas regulations by the Commission. And we talked at one of the earlier meetings, for those who weren't there, that in Colorado, the state has passed a law that basically gives the Oil and Gas Commission the responsibility to regulate the development of oil and gas in the state and balance that with the protection of the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of the state. So there are sort of two competing goals that the Commission has. And to that end, the Commission has passed a big, thick set of rules and regulations that cover a lot of subjects, but have also recognized that in those rules and regulations and in cases that have interpreted them, that local communities have a voice in what oil and gas companies can or cannot do within their community. And really what we're about, as far as a lot of, I think, what I'm about in this is helping the council understand where they can go and maybe where courts have said you can't go. And frankly, at this point, a lot of those issues are fairly open in Colorado. One of the things that the Commission has done is to identify where wells can be placed. It's not as if an oil and gas company can come and drill a well on Main Street or in a playground. There are rules which govern exactly where wells can and cannot be placed. And in the simplest form, We are in an area that the Oil and Gas Commission calls the Greater Wattenberg Area, GWA, GWA. And in the GWA, or GWA, there's a fundamental concept that applies to where wells can be. Imagine this is 160 acres. There are 640 acres in what is known as a section, which is a square mile, so a mile on each side. This would be a quarter section. And, 160 acres is a big piece of land. A house is probably on a eighth to maybe a tenth of an acre, so that gives you an idea of how big this area is, and then you put 4 of those together and you get a square mile. So within a 160-acre section, what the Commission has done for some certainty about where operations can exist is it has established a presumption that the surface operations, in other words, where you put a well, where you put the facilities that are associated with a well, which will include a compressor sometimes, it'll include storage tanks, it will include mechanical pieces of equipment that separate oil and gas and water from the oil and gas. They say that surface equipment has to be in one of these 5 drilling windows. And this is sometimes referred to as the 5 spot. So in this part of the state, an oil and gas company, if it has a lease, now remember, this only tells an oil company where they can put wells if they have the right to do so. And the right to do so is essentially a result of either somebody giving them a lease or the oil company owning the minerals. And I think you'll notice, for instance, here in Commerce City may own some minerals. Commerce City may own some surface rights, which would give it the right as a surface owner, as a landowner, to participate in the conversation of where these wells can be drilled. Because even though there's a possible right to drill in those places, a lease can say you can't drill there. An agreement by the surface owner, and I think Shea Holmes has, for instance, done this, has said that maybe we don't want you to drill here. We want you to drill somewhere else. We want you to drill down here. So agreements can be made that alter where these wells can be drilled. But the presumption is that there are those five windows where you can drill wells. Now, from those 5 windows, the presumption is also that you will drill a well vertically, straight up and down. But in Colorado, you can also drill a well directionally. So from this well, even though you have to put your well there, you could actually drill, not showing up very well, you could actually drill your well so that as it goes underground, it turns and goes directionally and maybe comes to a spot like that, or like that, or like that. The Commission also has recently started allowing something called horizontal drilling. It's a fairly new technology to this part of the state, and a horizontal well is different from either this vertical well or these directional wells. Generally, and people here in the industrial, correct me if I'm wrong, generally how far it can go. So for instance, recently there has been technology developed so that a well could be started here and drilled all the way across that 160-acre section and maybe all the way across the 640-acre section. So this horizontal drilling has really changed how the oil and gas companies are looking at development, I think. And I don't want to speak for the oil and gas companies, but I believe that's right. And in some ways it has possibly reduced the number of wells which they may need to drill in an area to explore, because they can drill so much further with one of these wells.
Phil?
Yes.
Do you want to take a minute to explain that horizontal well is producing sort of along its length as opposed to just...
Sure. Yeah, imagine that you got so Matt, by the way, and Matt represents Hillcorp, and he and I have been on the opposite sides of a number of cases, so he's not my shill in the audience, asking questions and prompting me to give the right answers. In fact, we're negotiating on the other side, opposite sides of a table, an agreement right now for some other clients. But so imagine, I'll call this a vertical well. So here's the surface of the ground, and you got a well right here. And it goes down, straight down, vertically. And let's say there are a number of different places where you've got rock, you got maybe shale, but you come to an area called the let's just use the Niobrara, because people have heard that. And this is the formation along the Front Range that has really caused all this development to accelerate. With a vertical well, if the well is drilled vertically down, you have basically this much of the well, and you drill a hole, you put a pipe in it, just simply stated, you perforate, you blow holes in the pipe like a sieve, you make it like a sieve, the oil company injects water and chemicals and sand into this zone and kind of puffs it up so that the oil and gas can escape. And they flow back as much of that oil and water and or the chemicals and sand as they believe is appropriate, and it's followed by oil and gas. That's why they do this fracturing. That's what they call hydraulic fracturing, because a great deal of water is used in the process. So that's a vertical well. But let's assume that a different kind of well called a horizontal well is taking place. So it would start at the same place. Let's just assume it starts here. But instead of just going straight down and having maybe 200 feet of the pipe exposed to the Niobrara Formation, the technology of the oil and gas companies is such that they can actually, they bend the drilling hole, and with the great weight of the drilling pipe, they can actually, in a very slow way, bend the pipe itself with joints. And I'm not an expert on that. The Halliburton person can probably tell you a lot better than I can. I'm sure he can. But instead of going straight through the formation, this is like a icing in a cake. They go into the formation for a great distance. So one well, instead of having 200 feet exposed to this potentially productive formation, may have 5,000 feet. So you can imagine that, and then what happens? Okay, they've got the well drilled, and just like with this well, they have to somehow figure out a way to get the oil or the gas into the well bore. So they do the same thing. They perforate it, and then they inject the water and the chemicals, but instead of doing it one time, they may do it 2, 3, 4, 5 times. I don't know how many times that they're doing it, but quite a few times. So this one well will recover a great deal more oil than a vertical well. So that's why this well would be so much more productive potentially, and that's assuming that the Niobrara Formation, where this well is drilled, actually has oil in it. Sometimes, I won't speak to that. The industry can speak to whether these wells are being productive, if there's some good ones and bad ones, or if they're all just gushers. I don't know.
Phil, do you mind if I'm actually behind you? I know that's weird. Back here.
Oh, yeah.
Do you mind if I just, especially for the residents, provide a little local context about what a quarter section is?
You bet.
And a section, et cetera? Would that be helpful for everyone to understand what the scale of this is in specific terms?
Before you start, Chris, could I speak to that last point about whether the potential is there?
Yeah.
Well, I think the expectation is it's there, because unlike the drilling in the DJ sands in the lower Dakota, this is a continuous formation. And the reason we're here today is because just one company has purchased 2,200 acres inside the city. And just to the south, ConocoPhillips paid $137 million for similar land in terms of geologic similarity to drill at the Lowry landfill. So when it comes time for Phil and I to present about a potential development, we'll still simply take all the city, since all of the city is underlain by the Niobrara, and apply these windows to give some idea about the future total development in the city, since the companies will not provide that.
So with the 5-spot in mind, as Phil outlined, it's based on a measurement of a quarter section. So I'd like to just provide a little context about what that might mean, especially for residents who are familiar with local landmarks and roads, so that that has some meaning to it. So this is a map of the northern range of Commerce City, and just to provide context, this is the Arsenal to the south. This is Highway 2 running up through the map. This corner over here, this is E470, 96th, 104th, 112th, 120th, Peoria, Potomac, Chambers, Buckley. These roads that I outlined, they are all at 1 mile sections. So just if you're driving, it's a good way to keep track of how far you're going. They're all 1 mile from each other. What that means is you can look at this map and see what is 1 mile by 1 mile, and it corresponds to that system that uses a section. So I'm going to just pick one just for illustrative purposes. In no way am I suggesting that there are leases or drilling activity going to occur. I just have to pick something. All right? So if we use 96th, Potomac. Why did it do that?
Sorry, I'm zooming in on you.
Oh, sorry. Goodness. Potomac, Peoria, and 104th. That's 1 mile by 1 mile. So that is actually made up of 4 quarter sections. So a quarter section is just 4 quarters of the section. So this would be 160 acres, another 160 acres, obviously a third, and a fourth, 160 acres altogether. This is 640 acres. Everybody with me?
Yes.
All right, so if we take that any one quarter section, if we apply the 5-spot rule, there would be an opportunity for 1 4-acre corner of the 5-spot in about those locations, and then 1 10-acre for the center. You repeat that 4 separate times, and per section you get 20 drilling windows per section. So that would be an example of what we would have from 104th to 96th, Peoria to Potomac. Now, I should note, let's see if I can magically make this happen again. If we back up just a little bit, you can see, look at that, it works. You can see these little areas where there's all these little lines, and it may be difficult to see up there on that map, but all these little lines, those are actually local roads. Those local roads represent existing platted and usually built residential lots. So the opportunity for the 5-spot to occur in those places is non-existent, where there are built homes. So the 5-spot, I guess I would say, don't... My encouragement, as I'm learning more about this, the 5-spot sort of exists in a theoretical sense. As you apply it in a practical sense, though, there might be real-life limitations that mean that 5-spot isn't available. You add that to the surface use agreement aspect that Phil was talking about, and the reality of what may be out there may be different. But I think it's helpful for the committee to understand what the COGCC allows per its code book in a sort of abstract sense. What could be done, without some of these other conditions in place. And so hopefully that provides some local context to the concept that Phil was talking about. Does that make sense?
I got one problem with, if it's only, they can be, 350 feet away from buildings, then they could be in some of those developments, in parks, things like that.
Yes. Well, okay, when I say yes. So let me clarify that. As I understand it, there are some surface use agreements that were signed between a developer and a potential mineral rights owner or operator that allowed for the location of certain windows to be in replacement of the 5-spot. So if you look at some of our existing developments, my guess, I don't have access to these myself, right? These are really private contracts between the two estate owners. My guess is that some of these, maybe these shared school park sites, might also be serving a purpose of a drilling window. right? So within these developed areas, I guess what I was saying is I don't think it's legal for an operator to come in and just start tearing houses down to get access to their minerals. But if there's a surface use agreement that allows for a window that still meets those setback requirements, meaning it's big enough to meet that radius requirement, in the middle of that neighborhood, that probably then would be allowed per setback rules of the COGCC. And
the 350 feet, that's just from the well, right? Not from the edge of the drilling activity, so.
Correct. Yeah, that's not, yeah, exactly right. That's just from a point in the overall site.
So Chris, up here in the northern area, where's the industrial areas located in this map as far as, because if I'm correct on this.
As you're driving up Highway 2, if you look to your left, you'll see the Cass development site, GCC, the thing with the giant dome. You guys have seen that, right? That's a landmark everybody knows. That's right about here, right? The Murray Farms is here. The part of what was called the Enclave is right across from Havana, from that. So this is really the Kushnoff Industrial Park, the Cummins development that looks good, hopefully, that is on 104th. That's the industrial area that exists in the northern part of the city.
Now, Murray Farms is not industrial. That's farm zone, right?
It is today, yes.
Yeah.
This is the future sort of land use designation.
So Murray's is still ag, right?
It's currently being used ag. He has a zoning that's mixed. It's zoned. He gets to continue to use it as a farm, as a legal non-conforming use. No.
No?
In a mixed-use area, right?
Correct. That is right, yeah. But I guess the big picture point of what I think, I was just trying to add some context to Phil's idea about what the COGCC rules are for drilling windows. What does that mean, in, for example, in our northern range? I would hate for that to
and
be...
then when you magnify that, there's a lot of homes there. And, right now, currently under the Land Development Code, you could only drill in industrial areas and in public zoning. Am I correct?
For new wells, yes.
For new wells.
So, for example, the permit that is pending right now, that's in the city limits, is right here, in the Settlers Crossing development. Now, the Settlers Crossing development is just agricultural land right now, so it's obviously not going to have any problems in meeting that 350-foot setback. That 350-foot setback requirement, or 150 to residences in a non-high-intensity area, is for current conditions, not for some future condition that might exist. So their setback situation here, they're not going to have any problems meeting COGCC rules. That's a recomplete well, though. So it's not required to get a use by permit per the LDC. It's already there. So the LDC only requires new wells to get this permit. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes sense.
Yeah, I'm not asking if anybody agrees with it. I don't want to step into that. I just want to make sure that we're all at least operating from the same page factually.
Okay.
Yeah. Chris, can I ask a question? When you go to one of the very dense sections and you look at drilling windows, how would you see that playing out with respect to the likely horizontal drilling in the Niobrara? That is, could a drilling window allow drilling under a high-density community?
My understanding of it is just as a layperson, as I understand it, yes. But our codes, the LDC does not attempt to regulate subsurface or down-the-hole operations. It only attempts to regulate the surface operations, where it's located at the surface. So if it goes below the surface in any number of directions, maybe it does, from what I understand from reading literature and talking to people, it sounds like that's what happens. If a high-density area, they don't own their minerals, I think that's the whole idea with horizontal drilling is it's an opportunity to go in an efficient way that's not as intrusive to get those minerals that people own, that operators may own. Or
Let me just interject there, though. Let's use. Could you zoom out just a little bit? So the easiest way to understand the 5 spot, or the 20 spot, if you've got a square mile. Look at this section. Let's just assume there's no houses, no buildings, no nothing there. It's just farmland. So, first of all, whoever wants to drill there has to have a lease or permission. They can't, just because there's 640 acres sitting there, they can't just go in and drill. But in theory, in this section here, if there's no buildings, no obstructions, and they have a lease and they have the surface rights to access that lease, the oil company would in theory be able to drill up to 20 wells. And that's because there are those 5 spots. Now, I mentioned horizontal wells. A horizontal well could be drilled from here and go all the way across the section. And
So drilled here, and then you could go in a certain direction, any number of directions, really.
the oil companies can speak to this, and maybe somebody here could say how many horizontal wells are being drilled in a 640-acre section today. I think that would be good information to have.
We've talked about this a little bit before. I know of one 640-acre section in which there are 8 or 9. I actually am not sure if it's 8 or 9. And for one point of clarification, all the drilling windows that you're talking about really do pertain to surface operations. I think Chris has alluded to that. And not downhole operations, not subsurface operations. There are other rules, and maybe, Phil, you were going to get to this, that dictate how far apart the downhole drilling, producing parts of the well have to be. And that currently that's 1,200 feet. So there has to be, that's kind of what dictates how many you can get into a 640. So you have to be 1,200 feet, one well bore to the next. And if you're talking about a horizontal well, then pretty much the horizontal laterals have to be 1,200 feet, one from the next.
And Matt, would that explain why in a horizontal situation you might have 8 or 9,
right,
the maximum number of wells under current regulations as opposed to 20?
That's exactly
right.
right.
Vertical.
And then there are also, we'll use the term setbacks, and it gets used in 2 different ways, but because of the mineral lease rights, you can't drill too close to your neighbor's land. So around the perimeter of that 640 on the inside, like Chris is showing, there is a requirement that you, in the GWA, that you be no closer than 460 feet to the boundary line. That applies on both sides. Okay, so
Both sides of what?
both sides of the boundary line, the lease line. We'll assume it's a lease. So you got a 460 feet setback.
Oh, so if the lease is in this area, you got to have 460 feet this side and this side.
That's right. That's the right way to think about it. Yeah. So all of those rules, and as they're applied on the ground in a specific situation, dictate, how many well bores you could put.
Let me just try to wrap up this spacing by talking about some other rules that the Commission has, and you've heard references to something called a setback. A setback is the number of feet between a well, where the well comes out of the ground, called a wellhead, and a building unit such as a house or another occupied structure, a church, a school, an assembly place. And where you have dense development, I'm going to simplify this, where you have dense development, where you have a housing subdivision, unless there is a place in this subdivision that is 350 feet from the houses, in all likelihood, a well cannot be located on the surface. Now, I'm just pointing here at this green. I don't know how far that is from houses. It's potential that might be a drill site if it's within a window or it's permitted by some agreement between, say, Shea Homes or whoever the developer was. But there's been a mention, too, of, well, okay, that only deals with the surface. It is true you can drill under. Yeah, you can drill under homes, parks, lakes, reservoirs. It's done in a lot of different places. But to be able to do that, again, the oil company or whoever is drilling the well has to have a lease and has to have a permit from the state, and has to get whatever permits Commerce City or other cities require. So just because the oil company might have this parcel of land under lease, unless there is something that allows it to go under the properties of the other people, a lease, some kind of agreement, it generally would be prohibited from doing that. There are some special situations that are called forced pooling, where that might be allowed even if there wasn't a lease there, if, say, the rest of this property was under lease. But in general, no matter where you are in here, you have to have a lease. And if you're not if you can't find a location 350 feet from these houses, in all likelihood, you're not going to get a permit. Now, you may be able to drill from here, but you wouldn't be able to drill from there. And I've simplified it greatly, but what is the practical effect of that? The practical effect of that is, and Wes and I and some other staff members and Phil met yesterday to sort of go through what does it mean when you have these other rules that say you can't drill here. And there's what we call the high density area, which is an area that setbacks will be greater, 350 feet, or even where you have golf courses. You may be able to meet certain requirements with permission of the commission to have what we call a designated outside activity area. If you have a lot of people congregating in a place, the commission can say, well, even though there aren't a lot of houses here, there are a lot of golfers here, and you may not be able to drill a well there. That's a decision the commission has to make. So suffice it to say that even though there are 5 spots in every 160-acre section, not all 5 spots are going to be available in Commerce City. And I don't know, Wes, if this is a good place for you to discuss what we discussed? Sure.
You know, this is, I'm sorry, we talked about the relevance of this, and I'm guessing what Mr. Wilson's about to do.
Oh, I don't think you are.
This is not going to head in any helpful direction, Phil, as we've talked about in every meeting since then. So I guess to Tom's questions earlier, if this is the direction that we're going this evening, I'm going to excuse myself when we actually get back to working on something where the city council and you as their employer are moving in a direction to adopt regulations or do whatever you feel like you need to do, then I'll return, and I don't want to speak for my colleagues here, but I think this is not helpful.
Chris, I think it is helpful because we have to get people to understanding what's going on.
I do understand.
No, Chris, you understand, okay? The citizens need to understand because when this comes to whatever city it's going to come to, there's going to be the impact. People have to prepare for that. So we have to give them an understanding of what's going on right now and what the potentials can be, okay?
Councilman, I appreciate that. This is a pie in the sky, let's throw something and see what sticks at the wall in terms of the potential here. As we discussed, reality is far different. You've got one well in this vicinity that's not even in the city boundaries that started this whole discussion. And we're at a place where this is an exploratory play. We've made that clear. There may not be any wells in Commerce City or in this environment at this point in time. And we just don't know that. So I appreciate
Right, but we have one, but we just have one drilled, and they want to go in and do some more drilling in there. That's right. So there has been something there because we were understanding that they would let us know, Hillcorp's here, of what kind of producing well. Was it a producing well? The well that's on there right now, as far as the pump jack, is it producing?
Yes.
Because we were told we were going to get an update that it was non-producing well or what the potentials were, and we never did. At least
I don't
didn't
know if
get
you were
that.
here last week, but actually, okay, and I don't know if what Mr. Wilson is going to say is relevant or not because I haven't heard what he said.
we're gearing up towards having
I let you speak. Will you let me speak, please?
I'm responding to your question.
Well,
I wasn't here last week. I am anticipating we're going to put some hypothetical number out there for 9 wells per section times X number of sections in Commerce City. That's not helpful to getting to the point what the council has directed us to do, which is to look at the code, revise it, and determine what is lacking in Commerce City's land development code. That's not going to help us get there, I can assure you, because quite frankly, this isn't worth anybody's time to deal with the fiction that may never come to be. So I'm just registering my issues here. As I've said to folks before, we can spend 3 or 4 hours for the rest of our lives and never come to an agreement. If we're going to work towards something legitimate that will address the citizens' concerns, we're happy to participate. If we're going to be responding to allegations that may be fiction or fact for the next however many months, it's not helpful. It's not getting us to a place where the council's directed us to go, that we're willing to go. It's,
I think we understand your point. And are we going to let him run the meeting? I mean,
I'm not running the meeting, Jody. I
mediation
appreciate that. I'm trying to offer my perspective.
Can we please be at least courteous and let
I
Mr.
have
Wilson
been
present?
very courteous.
At this point, if you don't want to stay here, I would suggest not staying, but let
Well,
the
here's
man
the thing.
speak.
We wouldn't have to make
citizens
such
here that have
guesses
come.
if Anadarko would provide information. I understand it's proprietary, but the Anadarko's holdings are right there in the Frontier neighborhood, in that section right there. So you could say, we've got this land, this land, this land, and we've been looking over that. We think we might do this and this and this, based on exploration in the area.
Hey, Tom, can we get a point of order, please? Thank you.
Is the same one that I'm telling you tonight. We have no plans in Commerce City right now. That might change tomorrow. That might change a year from now. But at this point in time, we're simply here to provide you the information so you, the elected officials, can make the right decisions about what they want to do for their citizens.
Right, the elected officials that were elected by the citizens who are here tonight to listen. Can we move forward with Mr. Wilson,
In the
please?
vacuum, we have to make some guesses to tell people what they're going to have. Well, there is, because we don't know.
Tom, okay, I'm going to try to bring this back around. I'm going to ask Mr. Wilson, I mean, are you going to add to what Mr. Barber has said, and is it going to be, or is it going to be more about what people are afraid of, which is the wild ultimate guess?
I don't think it's a wild guess. I think that's putting your judgment on it. So I think that's inappropriate to say that.
Let me just say, here's the background, what we understand. The USGS has produced a map showing the Niobrara Formation exists throughout Commerce City. So it's an unconventional resource where the industry has been successful drilling horizontal wells into it just to the north. And to the south, ConocoPhillips has bid a large amount for similar prospecting. Here,
Wes, do you know how much per acre they paid? I'm just curious. ConocoPhillips, do you know how much they paid per acre for those leases? And
it was $137 million for 21,000 acres, about $6,500 per acre.
Okay, thank you.
And that was just a state land board sale. So we're hearing a lot of consistent information from the industry putting down money on leasing, including Hillcorp's 2,200 some acres here in Commerce City. So we just went through a simple equation, a geologic analysis, that I call full build-out potential. It's like clearly labeled potential.
Can I ask why you call it a geologic analysis?
Because of the ubiquitous, continuous nature of the Niobrara throughout the city. It's not, the industry's not obtaining a trapped, unconventional oil and gas formation. The formation is continuous.
Would you tell me the difference between unconventional and conventional as you're using it?
The way the USGS uses it. And
well, I don't know what that is. I'm asking you a question.
Okay. Let me finish.
Well, I want to understand what you're saying to us. You're telling me that
the USGS applies a term of unconventional to continuous formations that lack the sufficient permeability to yield. So in this case, the Niobrara has been found to have a high total organic content. Drillers have been successful to the north, quite successful. The first wells drilled into this formation were producing at the rate of 90,000 barrels in the first, 50,000 barrels in the first 90 days. Now that was wildly successful. But all I'm doing here is taking you through an exercise of potential. So we simply take the 4.2 square miles that Hillcorp has leased and apply the information Hillcorp has given us about the possibility of 8 horizontal wells in each section. That makes a potential for that corporation in the city of 34 wells. Now, I did the same thing just abstractly for the whole city. And this needs considerable refinement, as we discussed. Just abstractly, if we take the whole city of 25 square miles, all of Commerce City, times those 8 wells, there's a potential for 200 wells in the city.
Okay, can I stop for a second and just point out some facts? A horizontal well costs about $6 million to drill. Hillcorp has no plans to drill $48 million worth of wells in each of its 4 sections. It's a huge risk. One horizontal well is a huge risk, even for these big companies. So you drill one, if it's economically return on investment, you might drill a second one. That's what Chris means when he says this is an experimental play. So it's true. If we drilled a gusher, we would drill another one. But to say today that because we have 4 square miles under lease, and then we're just going to multiply that by 32, it's like saying because I can throw a ball, I can be a major league left-handed pitcher. It just doesn't
like
correlate.
saying that if you, we're agreeing with you, Matt. We understand you have to have a successful first well before you drill a second. We're just observing that wells have been successful to the north in the same geologic setting. So if you're successful in the first one, if you drill the second one, and you drill them at the rate of 8 horizontal wells per section, your 4.2 sections you now have under lease have the potential for 34 wells, or double that if they have to go to 16 wells per section. So we're in agreement, actually. This is going to take time to unfold, 20, 30 years.
Or it may never, as long as we're going to define
Fair
parameters.
enough, it may never. But what we're doing is an exercise normally done on federal land. That's called the reasonably foreseeable future development. We don't stop with just one well and say, we know the company's only going to invest in one well. We look into the future. And when we look into the future here, we know the Niobrara is persistent. Pardon?
Is this item on the agenda? I thought.
Yes, this was follow-up.
We were to discuss the land use amendments. And right now I'm looking at.
Well, it is on the agenda. It's number 4, and we've beleaguered the point that Chris made for 10 minutes cutting into it. So can we please just start it? I mean,
well, I'm just about finished. Hold on.
Land development modifications.
Well, it would be less waste of a time if I wasn't interrupted. What we're trying to do here is to give
Trying to
some...
follow the agenda, sir.
It's on the agenda.
it's on the agenda. It's number 4.
45 minutes left in this meeting.
Okay.
See where we're going.
Well,
All right,
I'll just
back on.
conclude with
Okay,
this.
I just want to...
An exercise to see what might the potential be. We don't expect these companies to invest this much in leasing and drill one well. We
Well, if you put that
Well,
in
we're
writing
fine
right
if
now
that's
and
happened.
sign it, then we can move on, I guess. But you're not willing to do that, so I guess we need to go with what Wes is saying, correct?
Have you asked him how many dry holes have been drilled in this formation?
Well, why don't you,
know that.
Chris, why don't you elaborate on that and let us know?
There have been at least 6 dry holes in the Niobrara Formation in Colorado, starting from the Wyoming border down through eastern Arapahoe County. So if we're going to get into speculation, let's include some of the facts that go along with this, which is this is a very explorational phase at this point in time. We do not know if the geology here is similar to the geology up north. In fact, we can almost assure you that it's different. There is a geologic anomaly that makes the Wattenberg Field better than what we're seeing down here in terms of the geology down in Commerce City and out east in Arapahoe County. So we can talk about 9 wells per section, 16 wells per section, all night long. It's not going to get us to a point that the council has asked us to address at this point in time, which is reasonable, legitimate concerns in the land development code that we've been asked to make recommendations on, and we've been doing this for 2 months, and we're no further along than we were 2 months ago. We're having the same arguments every night.
Okay, let me bring us back around. I think it's safe to say that there's a range of number of wells that could be drilled within Commerce City. And staff is going to take a look at yet another exercise. We've been talking with some folks up in Longmont, Chris, and our GIS person in the planning department is going to try to take a stab at, with some of the current rules and regs from Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, take our northern area and kind of try to outline where, given those type of constraints like the 350 feet from a high-density area, taking what was pointed out as far as around the section, the setback there, and try to come up with a map that kind of shows where those potential areas could be for council to take a look at. That's correct, Chris? We're going to start on that when Jenny gets back in town in a couple of weeks. Okay, great. So I'm going to wrap that discussion up. I think it was some good discussion. And we're at about 8:25 or so, and turn it to Chris to kind of start talking about what is in our current land development code. And then at about 8:50, we'll just check in to see if any new people would come in that want to make a public comment. Thank you.
Tom, can I make a public announcement? I sent this out to the committee. The Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission is having a public meeting, a series of public meetings. The first one is on February 23rd, which is, I don't know when that is. What is that, next Thursday?
Today, I think.
Next Thursday at 1 o'clock at 6060 Broadway to discuss this issue of setbacks and whether the setbacks that are now in the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission's code are adequate, inadequate, or whatever. So citizens are free to show up at that meeting, and I put some brochures in the back, and I just wanted to make sure people knew about it.
What's the address, Phil?
6060 Broadway, Denver, Colorado. It's the Hunter Education Building. Put some back there, but sure.
So just so we're clear, we're not going to be able to see the information that Wes and Phil have. Is that what we're saying? Okay.
We, staff met with Wes. That's kind of why we tried to tailor this discussion to give kind of a range of what's out there.
Right, but the citizens, again, part of the citizen group, our job is to get feedback from our citizens. This is something that they wanted to know. So how do we communicate that to our citizens? So we're just left not having that information. When we talked last week that we would have that information. Is that a discussion we need to have after the industry leaves, or what? Because again, we have citizens who want this information.
Let's put that at the table for discussion for planning for next week's meeting. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of that information may come up as Chris and staff are doing their work, working with Be the Chains, and we can definitely bring it back. And we can also, if there's some information that we need to send out and put on the website or send out as a part of the notes, we can definitely do that as well.
And frankly, what's been said here by Wes and by me was a lot of what was discussed, this range. So it may not be in writing, but I think you've heard essentially what we had talked about.
Is that true, Wes?
Yeah, I mean, we were only comfortable with the 4.2 sections that Hillcorp said they had leased. So we took 8 wells per section times that to come up with 34 potential wells by Hillcorp in the city. What the city staff has offered to do is a considerable refinement. They'll take a look at these open windows, and you see what the way I had done it was simply take all of the city as being suitable for drilling. They'll now refine that by reducing it where there's such density that there's no window, and take that section or more out.
Is Rocky Flats part of the 25 square miles?
Rocky Mountain
It's
Arsenal?
not.
Sorry, Rocky Mountain Arsenal.
No, it's not. We understand that the Fish and Wildlife Service isn't going to lease, or there's not existing leases there.
We don't have regulatory control over them anyway. So.
Is that what you understand, Charlie? That the Fish and Wildlife Service doesn't have a future plan to lease?
That's right, and they own most of the United States owns most of the mineral rights on the arsenal.
Right. So I did one more exercise. I took the surrounding area adjacent to the city within 1 mile, which is approximately 15 more sections off to the north and west. So if you had 40 sections that your citizens were principally concerned about because you're concerned about both the city and the 1 mile adjacent, then 40 times 8 has a future long-term potential of 320 wells. You can see we're just taking 8 wells per section. As we understand this play, this Niobrara play, is currently being developed.
Phil, I think your presentation, if it's to be continued, you should look at what it takes to unify some of these areas. I mean, with the feds, it takes a certain percentage of the land being under leased, but I think it's much less. Well, I know what it is.
And he talked about that.
Would you just?
Well, there is a difference between unitization and pooling that's meaningful.
And we will have a discussion about it.
That'll be fine, because you know.
Hey, Chris, you start. Go ahead.
Well,
I'm not going to sit here and listen to bickering.
Well,
I'm not going to do it. Our council
Well, then why don't you
is so
leave?
far
Because I think that someone was speaking, and I think it's common courtesy to let him continue without being interrupted. But Mr. Castillion, and then you. So please, Phil, can you please continue your thought? This, I mean,
The first
mediator.
person that was supposed to be speaking was Chris. He interrupted Chris. So let's let Chris do what he's going to do so we can get out of here by 9, because I'm not staying here.
Because it's so important that we get out at 9, isn't it? That we can't sit here and discuss and let someone have the
You want to
courtesy of
discuss
speaking.
it after 9, sit here and
Okay,
discuss it.
whoa, wait, all right, let's bring this back around. Chris, why don't you go ahead and get started?
Right.
That is an awesome introduction. I love speaking after that. Okay. I'm going to do a very factually based discussion, and we're going to walk through what is currently in our land development code. I'm not going to be making recommendations of anything that needs to be taken out or put in. I'm not going to give a legal opinion of what is or is not preempted. I'm just going to do a review of what we currently have in our code. As background, we redid our zoning ordinance in 2009. Prior to that rewrite in 2009, we had zero regulations that covered oil and gas. None. There was no subsurface extraction section in our previous zoning ordinance. In 2009, when we redid the zoning ordinance, there were a number of things that were redone. This was one of them. We included this section you see here, 6 pages. I can tell you through our land development code process, it generated 0 comments in any direction, right? Or even just questions. What does this mean? Why are we doing this? We actually had included it in part of our outreach to highlight as some of the things that we thought were worthy of some discussion and feedback. Included it on boards and multiple outreach sessions, and it didn't generate any discussion at that time, which kind of makes sense, right? This stuff wasn't going on. There weren't new wells happening. It was only recently with some of these wells that it all happened.
With City Council?
What's that?
Outreach with City Council?
No, the community. We did the summer outreaches. We had a table on the LDC. We hosted open houses here. We had a citizens advisory group. It was quite large.
Because I was on the Citizens Advisory Group, and
that was the comprehensive plan.
Okay.
This is the land development code. So this was in 2009. The comprehensive plan was in 2010. So does that sound good? Background? We're all good. All right. Number 1. Normally, I'll just tell you this right now. If somebody were coming in to apply, the way this is organized, they would actually start with the very last thing, which is application requirements. Those are what you would want to turn in with your application. The reason I start with that is it provides context about when you can even submit an application. It's not contained right here in the section number 1. It's in chapter 5 of our zoning ordinance, but I can tell you that in our land use table, new oil and gas wells require a use by permit, and they're only allowed to get that use by permit in I-1, I-2, or I-3 zoned areas, unless otherwise stated in a particular PUD. I do not know, I'll be honest with you, I do not know the preemption ability of that. I don't know if the COGCC would call that legal. So, nonetheless, it's in our code. If we're going to make it through this, we can't debate every one of these. I'm just going to say that they're here. They may be legal, they may not, but they're here. So, use by permit, approved by our Board of Adjustment. That's manned by 5 volunteer citizens. They hear a case. These application requirements that they're in are submitted. They hear evidence from the applicant and any surrounding property owners, and then they render a decision based on findings found in our land development code. So with that, they have certain criteria that they use and that they have to include within that application. That's what we start off here with number 1. So if you look, Section 21.5266, subsurface extraction, well and production facility setbacks, except for flow lines, transmission lines, and power supply lines, as outlined below, here's the setbacks. I can tell you that this corresponds to the COGCC rules. 350 for high-intensity areas, and we actually go so far, a lot of communities don't do this. A lot of our research showed that most other communities had their setback requirements correspond to COGCC rules because it appears there is some debate about whether or not setbacks are preempted. I know that Longmont just released a draft of their draft plans on Friday. They're attempting to go further than what COGCC allows. In 2009, we mirrored the COGCC. So those two setbacks are the ones you've heard multiple times, but what the COGCC allows, that's also what we have. All right? So, moving on to the next page.
Quick question.
Yeah.
So applying that rule would allow drilling within an existing residential community. I'm just asking a question. So applying the 350 setback rules that currently is in the land use code would permit surface facilities for drilling within a residential area?
Not within a zoned residential area for a new well, no. You have to be zoned I-1, I-2, or I-3 to be eligible to apply for a use by permit. Now, we have zone districts where the boundary, you could be industrial on one side and residential on the other.
The reg safe date.
Right, yeah. And now, I will say this. I think I mentioned this last week. We have some PUDs up north that have windows set in them already from the get-go. There is no debate. They know where they are. They're zoned for that, right? And we have 3 that we have as examples. Settlers Crossing is one of those. So the well that's under review by the COGCC right now is actually a permitted use. If it was a new well, it would be a permitted use because it's indicated on their PUD. That one is not a new well, though, so it doesn't fall into, doesn't have to meet these standards.
Yeah, there was just an interesting exchange here, sort of off mic, and Matt was saying that his position that it wouldn't survive a legal challenge. Now, I don't take a position on that, but I thought we were going to go through having independent legal advice come here at our request to look at state preemption and citizens' right, even as far as ban. And I thought that would be essential before we get into these rules, because it'll come up each time. So here, for the citizens, listen to this. You understand it, that the current land use code wouldn't allow a new well within a residential area. But the representative of the industry saying they'll legally challenge that.
Okay, and I will not stand for you putting words in my mouth. I will not stand for it. So here's what was said offline. You asked the question if the setbacks are legal and would allow a well in a residential area. And 350 feet from a building would. Then Chris told us that Commerce City's zoning right now limits drilling, limits wells for new wells to industrial zoned areas. It is my opinion that that would not survive a legal challenge. The state of the law on preemption dictates that it is a state purview where wells are located. And that has to do with where the resources are and where people's leases are and their property expectations, all those things. I didn't take a position on whether I thought that was right or wrong or not. It is my legal opinion that, and I didn't say, and this is what you said, that I was going to challenge that. I said if it were to be challenged, it is my opinion it would not survive a legal challenge. And that is my opinion, and there's no reason for me to not say that. That's what I thought we were all here for. Ultimately, is for you to hear what industry believes, what Mr. Barber believes. I totally respect Phil Barber's opinion on this. I'm willing to hear it. I'm just telling you that I don't think, under the current state of preemption law, a county can say we're only going to allow wells in certain zoned areas. I didn't know that was your Commerce City's rules adopted in 2009. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
I'm not saying we're going to challenge them or not going to challenge them.
So I think that's a good example of something that I think we should put on the flip chart as something that we need to get more information on. So would everyone agree with that? The setback on if it's the zoning requirement of what's in Commerce City's current code limits it to industrial areas. What I'm hearing is that may not be clear. So maybe that's something we need to look into a little bit further as we're looking at what to do with our code. Is that agreeable to the committee?
That was the road Phil was heading down.
Right.
There, and we didn't
Okay.
get to finish.
Thanks, Chris.
Actually, I think there's two for the board. There's
okay.
What does a city even get to regulate what zoning wells go into? We asked the COGCC and they said no, but that's. And then the second one is setbacks. We mirror the COGCC. My prediction is the industry would say that they have, the state regulates that we are preempted from regulating anything beyond that. But Longmont's certainly giving it a go. I'm not making a value judgment on the other. I'm just saying that's probably a second bullet. Is that fair? I'm not saying good or bad. Just sounds like it's a bullet.
And for what it's worth, industry feels that setbacks are something we're more than happy to negotiate. More than happy.
Glad I said it then. It's not only a bullet. Let's move it to the top. Making progress.
Can Chris be the mediator?
What's that?
So we want Chris to be the mediator.
All right. The second part here on setbacks talks about if you can't meet our setback requirements, how can you go about getting exceptions to those setback requirements? Again, this mirrors the COGCC rules. I don't think that's the most pressing element of what we're all talking about here today. Number 2, disposal of exploration and production waste. It basically attempts to provide our Board of Adjustment the ability to ask questions and find out evidence about this, but it doesn't set out a standard different than the COGCC. So it introduces it into the use by permit process, but it doesn't set a standard different than the COGCC. Make sense? We're going to have a number of those, so I'm not going to necessarily go through those in great detail. I'll just say if it kind of mirrors the COGCC or if we have something different. Does that sound fair? Sure. Got to keep going. All right, signage. This is one, I got to tell you, internally in 2009, we really kicked around because a lot of this stuff, I think I've mentioned this before, a lot of this stuff is relatively new to planners. We certainly have no formal education in this, and I think I'm learning right along with the rest of the people here on this. Signage is one thing we do know about, however. We can regulate it, we can measure it, we can permit it, we can plan for it. So as a result, we have a tendency to want to regulate it. However, with that said, this one seemed to be one that when we evaluated it, COGCC was pretty clear that they would preempt any additional restrictions on what they have for signage. If that's different, or if the industry is willing to do something different on that, that's certainly an area we have expertise in that we can regulate on the front end. So I might even suggest that's a bullet.
Chris, can I just ask you a question on that? In your opinion, is there something lacking in the Oil and Gas Commission regs on signage that you would feel like Commerce City needs to have additional?
No, I think at the end of the day, the practical side of things is what won the day. It's our understanding the industry has no real desire to advertise, hear ye, we are advertising our well here with big neon lights and, with arrows. It's our understanding that the industry has no desire to really do that. If they did, right, it might be different. But because there doesn't seem to be that real life demand, we didn't want to invite a legal challenge, frankly.
I think Matt's client would be willing to sell signage rights for Dick's Sporting Goods Park if they're so inclined.
Access roads is the next topic. I'm not going to go through these one at a time. In essence, the standard here is that for equipment, the Board of Adjustment can ask the operator to increase or provide access roads that allow for access that indemnify any damages that are done to public facilities and ensure that they're of a quality that allow for emergency vehicles or the like. I can tell you that's what it says. So we go a little bit above and beyond what the COGCC requires on access. What this does not talk about is a traffic management plan on the actual roadways. I'll just leave that hanging in the air. Next one is compliance with environmental regulations. The first ones really talk about other people's regulations, and that we're going to hold operators to theirs. It's an opportunity for us to help enforce other people's. The second two, trash and debris, we're basically trying to regulate and trying to suggest that we're putting somebody on record that they're going to keep the site clean. There's no, I don't know how you do a standard for that. You can't have more than 2 pieces of garbage per 300 square feet. It's impossible to regulate that way. So we just put a generic statement in there that gives us the ability to regulate that. The last one is, this definitely goes above and beyond COGCC rules, City Storm Drainage Manual. So if operators on site, they can't break our already existing drainage rules and drain off-site onto somebody else's property. Yes.
But you do understand that the COGCC regulates stormwater runoff, or maybe you don't, but they do in conjunction with the Department of Public Health and Environment.
I sure do hope our city's storm drainage manual is not too far askew then, if that's the case. I'll be honest with you, I wish we had an engineer here. I don't know what the difference is at this point. I'm just being very fair with the audience.
Do you know if COGC recognizes individual entities like MS4 permits that, like, the city's got a permit with the state and with EPA that we have to comply with?
The short answer is I don't know. Well, I just know that well pads are required to have storm drainage management, best management practices. And how those connect to your city requirements, I don't know.
I was under the impression that locals could go above and beyond that, and especially if they have already existing surface drainage requirements. But I don't know that to be a fact.
Let me ask a quick question, Chris. Is there anything unique about those storm drainage that would apply within the off-site plumes off the arsenal?
It's surface drainage only.
But is there anything, you recall when we saw the map about the remaining plume that's very near the surface off the arsenal to the northwest?
96.
You saw those? Yeah. You saw those? Northwest, did I say it wrong? My question was, since those shallow alluviums contain some remaining contaminants from the arsenal until we get the full cleanup, years out, whether there's a unique provision right in that location of application of these stormwater rules.
Good question. I'm not sure. My guess is, and I'm going to look to Charlie here a little bit, our engineering department, in reviewing a drainage plan like that, would probably do some sort of coordination with the Army, maybe, Charlie, or not?
Yeah, the only surface water feature in that area is First Creek. And so I think there is, some stormwater plans for that area in terms of detention facilities or retention facilities. But again, we're treating groundwater in that area, and there is some interaction between groundwater and First Creek along a short stretch. And but I don't think there's any. We've tested First Creek water, and generally speaking, it's pretty clean.
We can certainly look and see if the First Creek Drainage Master Plan has anything specific to that issue. That's just not something I'm aware of, just being open. The next category is mitigation of impact. The first subcategory within those impacts is noise. Knowing what I know now, my guess is there's some stuff in here that basically corresponds to the COGCC rules. We have some hour limitations on here. I'll just go ahead and just cut off the conversation. My guess is that would be challenged. And number 3 would probably be, knowing what I know now, that would probably be challenged. I know we're not supposed to be giving legal opinion, but I'm not a lawyer, so really.
Why do you say that?
Why? Because I didn't go to law school. I guess I could pass the bar without going to law school.
Why did you say that the drilling restriction between 10 p.m. and 6 p.m.
Because I've just my research looking at some of the information provided by the Department of Local Affairs and et cetera seemed to indicate that the COGCC considers that to be an operational issue. nothing about time. But that would be the best way I would say it. Again, I'm not saying that's true or not. I'm just suggesting, as I sort of reread this from the 2009 effort that we went through, that's one that pops out to me like, well, that I didn't have all the information then that I have now. My guess is that would probably be challenged. I have no idea. Maybe they would lose. Who knows? I'm not a lawyer.
Chris, and the committee, I've added that as well to the flip chart as a question.
So in addition to the COCGCC rules and the hours thing, we also have some other things that could be done should the Board of Adjustment deem it necessary to help mitigate noise. So if you go to number 6, we have A through F on page 52. So these are in addition to COGCC specific rules. And these would theoretically, like most Board of Adjustment hearings, these would be applied on a case-by-case basis. So you would look at the surrounding land uses, maybe surrounding homes, and you would look and see when could you do whatever measures that might help abate or mitigate these noises.
Let me just jump in for a second. These are the kinds of things that historically have been imposed on permits on a site-specific case-by-case basis. We call them conditions of approval. So right now the paradigm is if you come forward, you're the surface operator, you're the surface owner or something like that, and you say, hey, look, I run a daycare facility during the day here, and having this kind of operation really noisy is going to mess everything up. What can you do? Can you impose some mitigating factors? This fence, these trees, these shrubs. And the answer is yes, we can do that. And that's the path forward that we've been trying to talk about from industry for a long time. You change the paradigm a little bit. You say, instead of this being the exception, this becomes the rule. These kinds of things become the rule in Commerce City, and now the onus is on the industry to get an exception from these if we want to. So these are the kinds of things that would be good negotiation points.
Chris, can I, Matt, would that be something that could be included in an MOU?
Yes. It actually can be included in the local government designation process with the commission. That's the active role that your staff person can engage with the Oil and Gas Commission.
You got to use the mic. Sorry.
So to repeat what Chris is saying, it's also the opportunity as, let's say Chris is our local designee, could work with the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission on a permit-by-permit basis as far as a permit condition, correct? Okay. We're at Tentel, little F Tentel. I saw one person come in. I've talked to that person. He does not have anything to say, so we're going to continue on with this exercise.
I think I'll be done before anybody leaves. The next category is visual impacts. You're going to see a lot of these sections start off with to the extent possible, which, if you're a regulator and you start talking about regulations, there's a difference between shalls and shoulds, right? You shall be doing this. You're obligated to do it before you can get approval to do something. That's different than a should. We're really hoping you do it. The to the extent possible is sort of like a should. It does give us the opportunity through the Board of Adjustment process to be able to raise these issues and, in essence, negotiate them through the use by permit process. The one thing that does get specific is colors. I can't tell you colors of the tanks, frankly, any of the facilities. I actually think, though, that now that in retrospect, I think that actually also conforms to the COGCC rules, who also get down to that level of detail. We then have some landscaping measures. I believe this allows us, this is another area like noise, with those walls and things where we can go above and beyond. And so you can see number 8 there talks about additional measures we might be able to do from a landscaping perspective. Safety impacts. These are 2 provisions that we found sort of stock in quite a few local jurisdictions, oil and gas regulations. So we included those. They seem to be nice, good, solid legal safety measures for the city. The last section before the actual application requirements, and I'm not going to go through the application requirements if that's okay. It's just a list of things somebody would submit. The last section is the abandonment and plugging. So what to do should, a well, once it's completed, how do how do you sort of up and leave if you're an operator. That section is, again, we don't really have anything above and beyond what the COGCC rules address. They do address this topic, though, but we don't really go above and beyond that. We do not need anybody to explain this tonight, but I can tell you we clearly utilized some best language from somebody else, because I promise you we did not write the initial use by permit shall allow any twinning, sidetracking, deepening, recompeting, or reworking of a well, because the planning staff doesn't know what those are. So the good news is we did research, and we obviously looked at other jurisdictions, and should we get to a point where we have a well that is going to be abandoned and the surrounding area is going to be reclaimed, we have the basis that has clearly sort of withstood the legal challenge to be able to use experts to help us with those abandoned wells. So, and then we get into the application requirements. If anybody has questions about what those application requirements are, that is not a problem. I actually think, okay, so as somebody who's actually going to probably be in charge of processing these, I'm actually very interested in this section. I'm extremely interested in application requirements. It's pretty bureaucratic, though. So if you guys have any questions about that, please let me know. I will tell you right now, though, Tom, I would like to add application requirements to the bullet point of list of things to talk about, because I think there may be some additional things that we could ask for through an application process that we don't currently list, that I think would help us and make an informed decision. So with that's it. Any questions? Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. So add application requirements to this list as well, is what I'm hearing, Chris?
Yeah, I think it's okay. It may not be the sexiest thing, but...
So let me attempt to recap a little bit. From what we've heard, at least the first two items on the list, does the city get to regulate zoning and regulate setback, are things that oil and gas thinks potentially we might be challenged on. Is that a fair statement? I'm seeing some heads shake.
I think that's fair.
These other lists like traffic on the road, MPDS or stormwater, some of the visual and noise impacts are things that we currently think we can regulate. They might be, also they could be regulated. There might be some things that we might want to discuss about an MOU or things that could be regulated through Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission working with the local designee on a permit-by-permit basis. Is that a fair statement from what I've heard from the group? And then the other thing that Chris added, and we don't have specifics, but we'd like to go back through and take a look at our application requirements. There might be some additional things that might be added from that standpoint as well.
And this might be a question for you, Chris. When you said to put the application regulations on it, when we're reviewing those, are we reviewing those as over all different cities to see if ours are stringent enough or conform with other cities, or if there's something we can do to beef ours up or negotiate into it as an MOU? That sounds like a lot of prongs on one question, but did you understand what I was saying?
Yeah, I think you're actually, that could be applied to the entire list. Actually, it could be applied to things that aren't on the list. How are we going to go about coming up with the suggested changes to the LDC and on top of that potential MOU items? That's a good question. And Tom, I know you're not the normal facilitator, so you might not be the best one to answer that either. But I guess that's the challenge of the group right now.
No, I think that's correct. That is part of the challenge, is to come up with things that, now that we've heard what's in our land development code, I think one of the things we should consider for next week is starting to list those things that aren't in the land development code that folks think we might want to consider to be regulated, without getting into the argument, can we or can we not. regulate those as a community, but start listing some of those ideas. Out of that may come some things that we don't think we should regulate as well. So that's just a thought. I will get with Councilmember McEldowney and kind of toss some of this stuff around, given what you guys went through over last week as well, trying to combine what we've done this week, what you guys did last week, to try to come up with what may be a good agenda or list of agenda topics for next week.
And also items to give to Phil that is moving forward in the direction that council has given us the directive to move forward in. Because everything we're trying to do on the list that's behind us and this list is move forward towards some kind of memorandum of understanding that, number one, to protect the health, safety, and public welfare of this community.
Let me ask a question, Tom. Well, for example, here, there's nothing in your current rules about air quality monitoring. And we had talked about bringing an expert to discuss that, and then I thought following that discussion, we would discuss how the Oil and Gas Commission currently does little monitoring and how that gap might be filled in by the community. Does that make sense after the full discussion of the air quality issues?
Yes, and I will. That's one of those items I will take up with Councilmember McEldowney as facilitator for the whole, and see how we want to suggest how we bring that forward to this group and how that discussion is held. And it may be, getting an idea of more what is regulated from COGCC or through CDPHE, or things that you guys want to get regulated. Just not, so I think there's a couple of different ways that might be handled in discussion to also allow the group to continue moving forward as City Council has asked the group to move forward. So with that, my watch shows it's a couple of minutes after 9. Is there any last words for the good of the committee? And then I think we should think about wrapping up.
Can I just request that the City Council, the citizens, can talk for 5 minutes after the meeting is done?
You're free to talk with City Council and the citizens. That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you as well?
Yeah. If you,
Okay.
yeah, I can be here.
Great.
Great. Thank you. Thank you all. Next week, if I remember right, it is on Thursday again. I believe it's at 6 o'clock, and we'll send out notes from this meeting. We'll see if we can't get an agenda out a little bit earlier and send out a reminder as well. Thank you. Oh, and just wanted to let you guys know, I failed to let you know earlier, I got a call from Dave Neslin at Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission. They are going to back away from this process at this time. They think, from what they relayed to me, is that they feel like they've been able to do what they needed to do to answer questions. They're still going to be available to answer questions, but they don't think it's appropriate for them to continue at the table at this time. So they are going to continue to work with staff after we, as council, direct staff to go forward with any type of changes or discussions, but I don't anticipate them being at the table. Okay, great. Thank you.
Maintain a portion of that. I'd like to see exactly what your timeline of work is.
We can
that.
do that, no problem. Just so you know, in the northern range with all the different subdivisions, they put in their own water quality systems, and they're required to maintain those. So, for instance, over by Stewart Middle School, you'll notice a little pond off to the east there from the school. Mm-hmm. That's for that whole Frontera Village area to the west and a little bit to the south. Flows through there. That's maintained on a regular basis and taken care of. Shea is taking care of a lot of theirs. First, right there by Second Creek and 104th. That's where we built the new bridge. Uh-huh. And then further on
And I will have the council remove you from this meeting.
Oh, so you work for the council?
I'm going to ask the council to remove.
I did get all home. I need a whole checker email.
Are you kidding me? We're sitting here getting beat up constantly. We're not making any progress whatsoever, despite the council.
Other than yourself.
All right.
Watch it. Sorry, Chris, that's the way it looks to us.
You know,
Can you accept that we might have a different opinion? I mean, no. Well, hang around.
So Renee and Tracy, are you guys able to hang back for a few minutes? I know you wanted to get out of here at 9.
Okay, yeah, I mean,
You guys talk, right? You don't know.
let's do it.
Yeah.
No, you didn't. I couldn't even open my mouth and he's calling down my throat. Man, it doesn't work.
Meet with us for a minute. Hey, Dan and Phil. Citizens can come too.
She's just going to have us meet right there. I mean, we're
Oh,
going to be
where? Over
Just
here?
right here real quick, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Hey, what?
We may have to, pull away for a couple weeks or so.
They just said 7. I thought it was 7.
Because it's all
yeah, I appreciate that. And I don't want
Oh, 6, yeah. No, I can probably find something, because I gotta swap out the trip.
So you can't do it at all, right?
Yeah, I could be here, I got a 7:30, so I could be here for the beginning part. I don't know how late I can stay.
And I'm not trying to
Well,
rush this along.
no, I understand what you're saying, but I understand what you're saying. Like today.
Yesterday and today.
What do you mean?
We never got a chance to make the presentation. Oh, I thought we were going to.
You got me. I wasn't running things. You got me. But we are going to start working on that other map that shows your technology.
I think there's a lot of holes there, especially on.
Yeah, there might be the like parts and stuff. Yeah.
What we don't know is how many variances. Those guys go through variances all the time, where they can.
Yeah.
And we need to get those statistics.
Sure. We can ask.
Yeah, well.
But you're saying for the COGCC.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. God, you're not going to get anything from anybody else.
Okay, I'm gonna see right now.
You don't want to listen to the citizens,
I
do
don't
you?
want to listen to you. What do you got to say, Dan?
I'm just listening to see what the conversation is.
What do the citizens have to say?
Okay, well, okay, I've got a whole bunch of citizens that don't agree with you. No, what I'm saying is that they don't want to deal with you, and they definitely don't want to deal with us, because they said they aren't dealing with the union of the whole city. This is not the Republic of the Union. That was exact words to me.
No kidding. So why won't they come to our meetings? Or what
They said, we are dealing with the whole city. Health, public safety, and welfare. It isn't only going to be in the union that they're going to deal with.
And we're very concerned about the whole city. Renee comes to.
Let's take it down a notch. And,
I'm going to take it down a whole notch.
I don't know how to tell you, but if we want to make sure you have a solution that you
We get hostility from oil and gas. We get hostility from the people. They're supposed to represent us. Ridiculous.
And I'm not saying nobody's concerned, but we do it to balance, and make sure that there's preferences.
To me, I see the good. But it's a good topic, not something that takes us off the course. It just adds to it because you can't look at everything.
Right.
So I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, like I said, we're committed to working. Thanks, Council.
And these guys are, they're never going to play now.
Yeah. Are you worried there's a third week?
We were told that council had drafted a 6-month emergency moratorium. Then we walked in here that night, and oil and gas was and the city did not exist.
Jason was at the last meeting.
I mean, he would not even let you speak. And I started speaking, he just jumped in. I was trying to find out if there's more to this than what I said. I mean, you get variances all the time. It's like a team. It's like a team. No, he said, I was going to tell him. But you think you could, you know, take more time accepted from us that he didn't want to do. But anyway, we get more people throughout the city. Like the ones that like to
This is going to be an issue that's brought up. And so, I mean, air quality, I keep hearing the same thing. We want to bring forth somebody that's going to be an expert on air quality. Okay, is it going to be somebody that we're going to hear full story of air quality, or we're going to hear one-sided story? Because council says the book is got to be equal on both sides. We can't just say that Western Fields theory on air quality and water quality are the only ones to go forward. If they have an air quality person, then there should be somebody, if they say, okay, this is not correct. They said mostly truth, but a lot of truth, there's a lie. So we want to get the full story. And council, this is what we've been saying the whole time. If we're going to work on air quality, if we're going to work on water quality, we're going to get it. We aren't going to do a sudden death thing. We want to see the whole story play out for everyone. And it isn't going to just be your side of the story. It's going to be the side that protects Commerce City. And Commerce City is 45,000 people. It isn't just you. And it isn't just you.
Excuse us. When have we told anybody from the South that they cannot be involved? When have we ever told anybody that? And I resent that a great deal, Renee,
Okay,
because
I
live in the South.
I accept the resentment, but I'm not going to go any further.
If our goal is to help and welfare the citizens, then it doesn't matter where they're from, it's not representing that. We're bringing it forward, and I can't imagine somebody from the South saying, hey, you guys are asking for too much. Where they really say that?
How come you haven't directed them to call Dan or Michael or Jody, if you know all these people that are saying that they don't want it to be people from Reunion, even though Tracy doesn't live in Reunion. The Reunion citizens stood up to help.
Why did it? Because it happened right across the street from you.
That's
They were,
correct.
okay,
It's probably going to happen on the people
what you don't
saying
say.
that from the South are being represented. Well, have them call us. We would gladly like to help.
I will have them do it.
Please.
Well, Renee, I understand your perspective because you likely accused me of going into bankruptcy. In return...
No, I did not. I said we are not going to bankrupt the city with a lawsuit.
And basically what I said, you put the health of my children below money, and that's not acceptable. And that's what
Okay,
I said.
let me tell you what happens when you bankrupt the city. You don't have any
I'm
money.
telling you, as your constituent, this is how we feel. This is our perception of the way you're coming across. Okay? Our perception is our reality.
Okay, let me tell you my perception of my reality. My perception of my reality, okay, it's only gone one way.
You're my representative.
Okay, as your representative. Okay. You don't want nothing except your way. Have it your way.
I'm trying to tell you this.
Well, I heard a lot of ways today from the people from Longmont down at the state hospital.
Well, and you talked a lot about Longmont. And it would be interesting if you guys were down at the Capitol building when
Yeah, funny how our city representative, who we pay a large salary to, walked out of the hearing and handed what he was supposed to give to the committee, to Jody. Damn good thing the citizens were there.
Well, and again, speaking about Longmont, Longmont testified, 7 people came and said what a terror it was. How the oil and gas industry, they've been begging for remediation, for cleanups, for fences, for things. They were promised to never give it.
Kids are playing on them.
Yeah, they had a document from
Yeah.
So we're talking about Longmont, but that's what's going, and
That's what's going to happen.
Yeah, it was thrown out of committee.
Because if we had talked to Longmont,
Thank God our citizens
and we
did.
heard the things that they said today, we could say, you know what, let's try to craft that into our regulations. We're not trying to be difficult. And in fact, we came in a very good spirit, I think, last week, and we felt very good about the outcome. And we thought, let's, listen, we feel great about this. And then we watched the city council meeting, and Renee Ola comes up and says, we're using that.
I didn't represent that.
They're trying to, estimate these laws. It's crazy. They're trying to figure it out. So let's just, let's start from there.
I'm sorry, I think that both sides are very tight. You know, in my assessment, most of the do you see yourself as one side or the other? I see myself on the side of the citizens and as trying to protect them against what I pretty much I think both sides can be very close. Do you see yourself as one side or the other, or this side? I think the position of the citizens and their concerns about what oil and gas.
And don't you work for the city?
I do. I
do.
I don't see an outcome. I just think that when the outcomes made, people have the best information they can possibly have. I think that's what it should be all about, and that's why we joined in. And that's the reason we continue to drive out here 40 miles every Thursday. And that's one way. Yeah. And it's not, I don't make any, there's nobody coming my way. All I'm interested in is citizens.
And the guys at the table,
Just
too,
really
the
can.
guys
Protect
that
their
are-
health, safety, and welfare. That's all I'm interested in. And I don't think that there's enough information on the table. There's been enough information presented to make a judgment about what the people should do in terms of regulations or what they should do with their
Well, what we're hearing from the
Yes, you guys will have to make a decision. We're not going to.
the bridge down.
No, I know it's not, but these guys, we're just trying to give you information. Honestly, we're trying to give you good information.
It's not like they're lying to each
And you
other.
presented with a 6-month moratorium. Why didn't city council present us with that if they had no idea that that's what they wanted to do? They came to us and said, we're voting on a 6-month emergency moratorium.
It's like there's more to it.
I'm sorry, but I put a chance to respond. So the statement that right now he wants to look at all sides before outsiders sitting in the audience. I sort of heard what I saw. So I'm very much and I understand that that's the position. But I haven't heard the word yes when we watched of course, it's a full comprehensive review. I haven't seen that yet. And so I think that it's kind kind of jumping the gun to interrupt. I mean, I can't even, I have a small child, I have to set up a very outrageous needs recently. So that I can, do the best to do that. And I think it's, so as a citizen, I'm not going to I'm still used to I'm bound to both sides, but I present that's my position on it.
You guys help us. So those are all the questions we have.
When we hear information, and when every single day in the news, something else happens in moving thing. Every single day, information is coming at us, and it prompts more and more questions. Our city council came up and said, we're going to do a 6-month emergency moratorium with us. Okay, we didn't tell them executives are 6 months to really review this. What did we get? We could take the mess going on and on and on and on for what, 2 hours that day? That didn't make any sense. And then we get thrown at the table with people that we feel like we're so every reasonable meeting we have is less. And so if they don't do a moratorium, why do they come back? So now the next meeting that we have, the 27th, there'll be a vote on the moratorium. Why did they put it out
I don't mean to check out with you.
And maybe, maybe you still become a full council meeting too, to let them know, it's not a simple process, it's gonna take, and I thought we could be done faster. Wow, it's not like a site where the stripes and things should be white and yellow, it's a lot of complex things to it. So it's gonna take a lot longer, I think we need to get that message back to the council, the full council. It's not gonna be as quick as a quick study, quick committee, look at this and boom, we're done here. By the red band-aids and the blue band-aids, it's a big deal. Yeah. If you want to see where it didn't work so well, call her out. When I talked to the land use guy there, and he was very disappointed with the process. He said they swept it through in 3 months, and they ended up turning it down, all the work they had done, all the rules they came out with, and then just came with some MOUs, and I could just hear the disappointment in his voice. He was really like, these are one of the city guys, the land use. I can get you his name, you call him if you want.
The reason I'm asking is because then I can
Don't wait very long.
He didn't testify on behalf. He's so our citizens testified.
I know there's
You sent that to me. You sent that to me, Phil. And I talked to Ms. and he indicated that there was a white paper. Yeah, he indicated there was a white paper produced and given to all the committee members. So.
But he left, he didn't stay.
The trouble was that the Colorado Municipal League was not very helpful to this. I don't know what they're.
Not helpful in terms of pushing the agenda. They were not at all. They were just finding success. And you saw that really get sharp with the blue wall system. When you realized even the existing rule that Commerce has for no new drilling that's Mr. Zone. You quite clearly heard that they challenge it. He did not say no. He said, be careful. Whether he said it or not, he said the industry would challenge it. That's different. Yeah, but he didn't say that's not that's a distinction without a difference. He said that the industry would challenge it.
He represents it.
He did say that. He would probably.
Okay, I tell you, clear over review.
You will pay on the meetings.
It just helps us pass through challenge. But if you have other questions.
All right, we'll see you around.
Are you good? Look at all the regulations.
Now we're looking at other cities' regulations. I don't know if we have the legal authority to
I encourage and entertain them to come. We are, so I think well, because Beth.
We need to go to.
Oh, no, I think.
I don't remember.
Yeah, you'll see.
So Vince
No.
Let's go.
We like to go take our car and sit in the yard and drink beer.
Oh, I see. That's what you do now.
It's
still dark.
Oh, we can go completely.
Which way do you live?
Like
So let's go
what we do is South September
True, they gotta.
Yeah, but we didn't know. But that would be on top of.
Oh, did I say north?
That would be a layer.
Oh, fine.
Okay, we're apart. But if we went,
But if we were to put that in here,
can we follow you? Yeah. But then too many things about
Like a large
I don't know. It's not my map. I just leave it in that little code circle.
those things are going to
Yeah. We asked about that.
So that wouldn't be.
We asked about it. Originally, we thought just. So yeah.
If we get the hours of operation, great.
Well, no, that's you're getting the condition. That's really council. It's not you want to go further than maybe what we're still allowed just to. Well, I think I don't know. That's a city council decision. So I don't know. Even without they want to disagree,
And then just always, the city council doesn't want it all. So all we can do is say, we'll keep it.
Well, no, I think we could. What does we heard tonight? We could probably be split up. I think I do. I think we've identified. See, I think that would probably be from each challenge. We've got a list started. This play this currently. But you know, we've looked at other people's codes. We've got this one detail. The documents that we have. I don't know if you guys have seen this one. I guess relations to government.
I've got.
Well, here's one section. I don't know if I gave a copy to Tom or if I have Arapaho here. No. Yeah, I may have given him. He may have my copy.
So you've seen it?
Yeah.
But you see, because it goes through, it talks about state.
And that's really good for you guys because there's a lot of stuff about how the cities will do it. So,
well, but no, it talks about. No, specifically, it says, like, for example.
But then it also covers applications.
Yeah, it's
things like backup and stuff that's good for you. That's just for the city. It helps the city figure out how to do backup.
I worked on a lot of MOUs.
That would really take me I think I gave Tom my copy a week or two ago because I don't have it anymore.
So it goes through all the things and it says it thinks and other things that are probably close. And so we've been looking at this kind of norms, right? We also have noise regulations. But then again, bear in mind Rule 802 is commission address the level of noise that needs. Well, they're saying.
Well, you won't get hungry.
Boy, that's hard. You really want to see it.
You want to get more.
Yeah, more. Now, whether or not we want to willingly step into those laws, that's why I brought up. But, we're doing all this.
I'm more worried about falling on my feet or,
These things
Of course. I know. But see, that's the thing. So, it will be nice when we should be able to live in a
Well, and that's what I think.
I will
they can come in and show where it is.
If you take the entire footprint of the
so that's the fact.
I mean, if it's
But that's the front end, that's the other relief. That's my point.
Whatever these guys tell you, I mean, 1,000
So you see where I'm going with that. There's multiple strategies. One is another strategy is trying to have some other level of government take it on and hope that it sticks.
Well,
I don't
go to it right now.
I don't know. Yeah, and then there's the federal level as well, right? The state is going to stake their claims that this is our domain. And so cities, counties, and the feds have to ask themselves. I got to tell you, I don't know. This is not my decision. Is do we want to try and infringe on their state claim? You know, the EPA is going to ask themselves that, and the municipals are going to ask themselves that. I don't know. I don't know.
The city has more power than the county as well. Home rule. I don't know exactly.
I would agree.
Right, but how do they know?
That was sort of the most. Me personally, I'm gonna take my city hat off for a second.
Well, I read that when the industry speaks, they're talking about
Right? Yeah, I agree. I'm with you. So that's not the question for me. The question for me is, of course, they said, they've cut off that way. Then groups and citizens everywhere should look at what other options they
Which was given, was doing
You can, but I thought that one only, that was only on a couple of specific sub-areas within the issue. Yeah, I'm not sure that, and again, you know,
that's what they mean.
Well, you're talking about,
That's what the healthcare basics.
I think we came back to
We don't know that. So we know that we don't know how far they can go.
That's my big reason, that's the part we're focusing on.
All of these bills.
So,
well, I can say that if we do well here, we'll have very I mean, we read about this guy, you were literally working with like a blog. Yeah.
I'm a geologist. It's been so long since
I think it's near district. He tours with the former mayor, just talking about it. And he said his kids got nosebleeds and he's sick a lot. And he's like, I think it's and they painted
right? I mean,
well, he left. You said that right. I think they paid the person asked him, so move it, yeah, we moved it. So yeah. So they must have wanted out.
He's got a non-disclosure.
To stay. Well, you want to do that method, but sure. I had to take care of my own. So you move someone there.
It's good talking to you. I really, I want the process to go well. I would suggest you guys, I will tell you, we're looking at this at staff level.
Yeah.
If you guys want to know what we're looking at kind of behind me, it's a good document.
You heard it, last week, the night before. Yes. Yeah, but lots of links, lots of links.
Yes.
Wish I had the memory like for Tom or you, whoever you saw. Yeah, for me, like, there he is.
I will just give you my honest opinion on what happened. So, that's what the institution is that our county has a lot of other councils.
Oh, that guy.
There's a lot of therefore, the process is I can tell you, like, it's a public document, that you get changed. They're on notice. No, the state's going to come out, not the industry. State.
That's wrong. For the state. You know, for,
It's not.
we had an
I know.
attorney general. What do you think? Something.
You know what? Go look at the
Well,
They're going back and retracted one up there. Look at the verdict.
And, you know, the expectation, I've read what the cheapest developer, the developer us. So we're talking about just issue there. Because, you know,
Right.
Apparently, it's already been gutted.
well, I know, but you have a right to ask whether it may be robbing you.
Again, we don't control the But we can ask a question.
I
Don't
realize
demand that the developer of residential housing show proof of bar.
Right.
Why would you not do it? They, I don't know if we can make it. It's a good question. But that's another one of these things to put on the chart.
But some, correct.
So that we can get it up on the table and start having the discussion.
You can't regulate the size of the activity, but you ought to have an idea of whether if there is, you know, just take this for instance. Would there be a logical reason the amount of water you could use in this area? Knowing that East Street, or whatever, on the arsenal, in cars, decides to have this committee. So, but you see, you say, I said, one or the other. I'd like to know. Is there a logical limit to what, and I think that's water here?
But if you listen to how
You think everybody's bad? Go talk to the state.
we know,
Yeah, I remember. So,
County commission.
one of the cities, these counties were put together. They combined money, combined resources, one lawsuit. And she would state, you look, you're not doing your job. You leave with the scared.
I think that's an interesting case.
I wonder.
That's an interesting case. But
It's Phil Seward.
I think that's an interesting question. I think you're getting down the road in a good way. You're sort of like your dominoes are starting to fall.
fracturing is not the cause of some of the issues that are coming up. Yes, mistakes. And I agree with that. But it's just like flying a flag. It's a great flag.
Right.
So, one plane around there. I mean, in some people's minds.
Well,
but it's my information we're talking to say.
So are we?
We have some knowledge. We don't believe in this. We believe in all that situation. 40% backyard. This
Right, yeah, I would agree. Yeah,
we don't
there's
get
other
hardly any.
factors that come in that can cause the state operation. I mean, so there's a whole, and this you guys
You're going to get a mix.
Well,
Not all the cities, not all the counties.
like the one thing push for stuff.
You're right. It wouldn't be everybody, right? It wouldn't be one of those. There aren't half the cities and counties join together almost to get. We don't have this anti Tabor situation. It's pretty much everybody. Everybody's sort of on the same page.
It's a tough one.
Oh yeah,
Because it also gets
it
into
would be a
property.
mix. Not that doesn't mean.
Well, yeah.
That's still not something that somebody should talk about.
I don't have the answer.
But information you would put into decision. I've always felt that, I've always operated that way. I hope that put it back to the table. I mean, I think it gives people confidence. I don't understand that. And, you know, they may not be happy with the result, but at least they know an honest effort was made to give them information.
Oh, good job. They spend a little bit more money, put gas in it, then you hire somebody, how do you do that?
You're not going to. I'm not going to. I'm certain you're not going to get an arranger for me. 17 years. This isn't a matter of. I hear you.
Yeah, I have a neighbor, he still says, I like your talk shop. Like,
Start to specify what we're making. But you can pose so the tactic that they want to produce is like it's a bit of a roller coaster. Something you know your decision. So
yeah.
It would be an unknown.
All right.
Good luck.
Have a good night.
Thanks, Cass. Here's your pen.
Oh, sure. Okay.
So you don't have to steal another one.
No, I was, because I felt bad. After Chrissy said that, I felt bad. No, don't feel bad because I'm the only one.
No, that's doing.
What did I say? Tell them. Yes. I'm sorry.
There wasn't much of a chance to say anything because he was so obstreperous, but obviously he's not just a sure.
I'm concerned. Just keep it going. Pressures of them. Say, hey, we want you. Thanks. Yeah, we don't want any emissions. But just a few things.
I did see him do that a lot tonight, and that's.
Tell me what, very specific. You want instead of qualitative to actually quantify. So we're not there yet, but that's
yeah, I have to look at it. It's like being in a job.
Like if you want to monitor them,
yeah, you can do it yourself. Oh yeah, well that's the thing is I like to pay. I find out who can get us a infrared camera and the air monitor. What does come on a tank? Gotta say tank.
when a lottery trades a certain area.
Because we're not going to produce.
Oh, yeah. That's not what I asked about.
I'd rather take it away your see the image. Very important messages.
You need access sometimes.
Certainly at the start.
That's well, right now. Look.
And that's okay, because that this article here, they had a truck we drove in the
So where'd they go?
They're still back there.
Yeah, I actually I ate them.
Yeah, so they're coming in.
Irritating to solve every problem. We should show up. Basically, all of a sudden we're in a meeting and then I turn around and
I don't understand. I can get upset about it. To be able to. If I asked you.
It costs a lot of jobs if everybody has to move out of this town. Good job. Jobs. We're ready to go.
If you had to put a couple say tank, well, to go president, that's another job. Hire another guy, another company.
Well, it might be 10 guys manufacturing it too. Think about the manufacturing. Creating jobs. It'd be done in China.
Safer. Exactly.
It's really good.
For the COGCC. I was ready. I had your back. If someone was going to. I was going to take you down. I was ready to move on.
Last year, my first year, my letters. I forgot.
Hi, you guys okay?
Yeah, we had to leave for a volleyball tournament in Omaha, so. At the West Center.
In Omaha City.
All the way downtown in Omaha Power.
Okay. Because, oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
I think that might be where we're standing.
Okay. It's a neat little path.
We're going to Omaha for a volleyball tournament. Yeah.
Thanks, Dan. That's right. Okay, sure. Oh, okay. Yeah, I was talking to kind of some reasons for the urgency of what to get the process done. And I see that. It's a tight road because.
Well, I think it's Jason's.
Did you? This is. He's got to get a little. Yes. The guy that you mentioned said he was going to have industry, and he ended up having that. Yes, I believe so. Yeah. I haven't seen it. I haven't looked on it, but I think they did. In lieu of the regulations. I think. I think the thing is, if you try to make regulations, they're not going to only go to that. Is that right?
Actually, I've talked to